Hi. If you are watching, this is August 22nd. So this will be lesson number 3. We are finishing up the fairy tale author Charles Perrault. We started the month with Little Red Riding Hood. Then we segued into Sleeping Beauty. And we will end with Puss in Boots, or the Master Cat. So this story today, very, very different from the other stories, but has Perrault's signature. Remember that Charles Perrault is considered the father of fairy tales. And he had a genius way of enhancing fairy tales. For example, in Cinderella, he added the glass slipper, which to me, that makes the whole story. In Little Red Riding Hood, he added the color red. You know, if she's walking around in a brown hood, big woo. A red hood, yeah, that's going to draw attention. Sleeping Beauty, he added the spindle. So big deal, it's a spinning wheel. The spindle has the prickly point, right? And then today, our story today is a cat who dresses in homemade, I always pictured Italian leather boots, these really high over the knee boots, and a bag, so that he can look the part, he can dress the part. Okay, so perfect segue into our story today. So what's really interesting about our story today is we don't have a protagonist. We don't have an antagonist. So we don't really have conflict between two people. We have conflict with society. It is basically man versus society, and that can be a problem. And the problem is our story begins with a gentleman who passes away and leaves his inheritance to his 3 sons. So what is an inheritance? I mean, you could look up a textbook definition. It doesn't have to come from a family member who dies. It can come from anybody who is bequeathing you, giving you part of their legacy. Sorry, I got a piece of fruit stuck in my throat from my smoothie. So inheritance is basically, it could be a monetary gift. It could be millions of dollars. It could be a car. It could be a pen, right? It could be anything that someone would like to include in their will to give you. So the story begins with a miller who owns a grain mill. And upon his passing, he leaves an inheritance to his 3 sons. The oldest son inherits the mill. Not uncommon for the oldest son, right, to be given the most. Think about royalty. The oldest son gets the throne. The rest are spares. The middle son gets a donkey. The third youngest son inherits a cat. So he's thinking he got the short end of the stick. He got a raw deal. But the cat is ruthless. The cat will lie, cheat, steal, kill, whatever it takes to make sure that his master, who is poor, can rise in wealth. So this theme today, see it on my board, our theme today is about climbing the social ladder. And this story was written in 1697. Not a far stretch. People want to climb the social ladder today. They move to America and want a better life because they can make more money here. They can have more things. They can have a better socioeconomic level. How easy is it to go from poverty to rich? You know, almost impossible. But Charles Perrault really intended this story to show that he appreciates a self-made man like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, not someone who's, you know, born like royalty with a silver spoon in their mouth and they never had to do anything. It was just handed to them. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I have an aunt who has $8 million and inherited it from her dad and made more money with some great investing. And she's never worked since, I think, the age of 30. More power to her, right? If she can do that. Okay, so let's begin our story. Here we go. There was a miller whose only inheritance to his 3 sons was his mill, his donkey, and his cat. The division was soon made. They hired neither a clerk nor an attorney, for they would have eaten up all the poor patrimony. The eldest took the mill, the second the donkey, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The poor young fellow was quite comfortless for having received so little. My brothers, said he, may make a handsome living by joining their shares together, but for my part, after I've eaten up my cat and made myself a muff from his skin, I must then die of hunger. The cat, who heard all this but pretended otherwise, said to him with a grave and serious air, do not be so concerned, my good master. If you will but give me a bag and have a pair of boots made for me, that I may scamper through the dirt and the brambles, then you shall see that you are not so poorly off with me as you imagine. The cat's master did not build very much upon what he said. However, he had often seen him play a great many cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, such as hanging by his heels or hiding himself in the meal and pretending to be dead. So he did take some hope that he might give him some help in his miserable condition. Okay, so right away, we are told that the youngest son is poor. Okay, so the fact that he gave the cat a bag and a homemade pair of boots is very telling that he's desperate. He's nothing to lose. Okay, so what's the deal with the boots and the bag? Okay, remember, Charles Perrault is the one who added the glass slipper, the red color, the spindle. Again, he's enhancing the story here, and there's symbolism with the boots and the bag. And the symbolism is this. What you wear, how you dress, your attire, if it's very expensive clothes, matters to royalty. And the cat would have known that. So he's trying to present a picture of himself as being rather well off. And it was ironic because kids do that today. They try to buy name brand, hip clothes so they can look cool and wealthy like everyone else. After receiving what he'd asked for, the cat gallantly pulled on the boots and slung the bag about his neck. Holding its drawstring in his forepaws, he went to a place where there was a great abundance of rabbits. He put some bran and greens into his bag, then stretched himself out as if he were dead. He thus waited for some young rabbits, not yet acquainted with the deceits of the world, to come and look into his bag. He had scarcely lain down before he had what he wanted. A rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into his bag, and the master cat immediately closed the strings, then took and killed him without pity. Proud of his prey, he went with it to the palace and asked to speak with his majesty. He was shown upstairs into the king's apartment, and making a low bow, said to him, Sir, I have brought you a rabbit from my noble lord, the master of Carabas. For that was the title which the cat was pleased to give his master. Tell your master, said the king, that I thank him, that I am very pleased with his gift. Okay, so here begins really the first part of the cat's scheme, gift giving. There is a protocol, an etiquette, if you will, to gift giving. If you give someone a gift, etiquette says you should reciprocate and give them something in return, right? For example, someone invites you to their birthday party and you bring a gift. When it's your birthday, you expect them to bring you a gift probably of equal value, right? That's etiquette. And especially if you're the king and you're of royalty, you would know that. Okay, so he's bribing him. Genius, actually. He was shown upstairs. Oh, sorry. I'm at the bottom. Another time, he went and hid himself in a grain field. He again held his bag open, and when a brace of partridges ran into it, he drew the strings and caught them both. He presented these to the king, as he had done before with the rabbit. The king, in like manner, received the partridges with great pleasure and gave him a tip. The cat continued from time to time for 2 or 3 months to take game is just his kill, to his majesty from his master. Okay, this is just 2 sentences, but it's very important. The king gave him a tip. When someone provides you a service, for example, you go to a restaurant and someone's waiting on your table, bringing you drinks and food. You give them a tip. So the king gave him a tip. So I just assume probably coins, like gold coins. And if the cat's been coming from 2 to 3 months, he's probably acquired a little bit of pocket change, if you will. So at this point, the young master who owns the cat, who inherited the cat, probably thinks, all right, so far he's doing pretty good. Here comes the second part, which is the encounter. One day, when he knew for certain that the king would be taking a drive along the riverside with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world, he said to his master, if you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. All you must do is to go and bathe yourself in the river at the place I show you, then leave the rest to me. The Marquis of Carabas did what the cat advised him to, without knowing why. While he was bathing, the king passed by, and the cat began to cry out, help, help! My lord Marquis of Carabas is going to be drowned. At this noise, the king put his head out of the coach window, and finding it was the cat who had so often brought him such good gain, he commanded his guards to run immediately to the assistance of his lordship, the Marquis of Carabas. While they were drawing the poor Marquis out of the river, the cat came up to the coach and told the king that while his master was bathing, some rogues had come in by and stolen his clothes, even though he cried out, thieves, thieves, several times as loud as he could. In truth, the cunning cat had hidden the clothes under a large stone. The king immediately commanded the officers of his wardrobe to run and fetch one of his best suits for the Lord Marquis of Carabas. The king received him very courteously, and because the king's fine clothes gave him a striking appearance, for he was very handsome and well proportioned, the king's daughter took a secret inclination to him. The Marquis of Carabas had only to cast 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances at her, but she fell head over heels in love with him. The king asked him to enter the coach and join them on their drive. Okay, all right, so here's this scenario here. Well, why would the Marquis, he's not even really the Marquis of Carabas, why would he go along with this bathing thing? Because so far the cat's been prosperous. So just a couple things that are really important I want to point out here. This is planned. This is premeditated. The cat knew when the king and his daughter would be going in the coach. He knew exactly what this plan would probably entail, and he probably knew what the result would be. He couldn't know, but he kind of set it up. So why would he hide his master's clothes under a large stone? Nobody really got this in class. The story doesn't tell you. Well, but the story's giving you hints. The cat is got a bag and some nice boots. What do you think the young master was wearing? Remember, he was poor. He's probably wearing peasant clothes, rags, if you will. Would the cat want the king and princess to meet him dressed in his regular peasant clothes? I'm guessing no, right? I don't know that he would know that the king would let him have some clothes. Kind of fell right to his lap, didn't it? And he was also, it says, a handsome, young-looking master. So of course the clothes looked good on him. So why would this daughter fall head over heels in love with him? Well, nobility, as long as you look the part, as long as you dress like everyone else, like you're wealthy, they accept you. Had he been dressed in his peasant clothes, this would be a different conversation. But the cat knew that, which is why he asked for boots and a bag at the beginning of the story. He knows you've got to look and dress the part to be accepted into wealthy society. And that's still true today. So this story is kind of set in, not kind of, it is set in 17th century France in the time of King Louis XIV. So, the dress was very formal, and he wouldn't have been seen in his carriage without looking perfectly put together. So this leads to our last one. This is the lying, the threatening, and the murder. Here we go. The cat, quite overjoyed to see how his project was succeeding, ran on ahead. Meeting some countrymen who were mowing a meadow, he said to them, my good fellows, if you do not tell the king that the meadow you are mowing belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped up like mincemeat. The king did not fail to ask the mowers whose meadow it was they were mowing, because He has to know, whose land is this? I must meet this person. He's just like me. It belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, they answered together, for the cat's threats had frightened them. You see, sir, said the Marquis, this is a meadow which never fails to yield a plentiful harvest every year. I've got to be honest with y'all. I've read this story. It took me about 6 times before I realized, oh my gosh, this is now the young master of the cat, the Marquis, who's really not the Marquis. That's a fake name. He's getting into this. Like he's like playing the part for real. The master cat, still running on ahead, met with some reapers and said to them, my good fellows, if you don't tell the king all this grain belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped up like mincemeat. So you'll see a pattern here, a repetition of the exact same thing. The king, who passed by a moment later, asked them whose grain it was they were reaping. It belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, replied the reapers, which pleased both the king and the Marquis. The king congratulated him for his fine harvest. The master cat continued to run ahead and said the same words to all he met. Okay, so we're assuming here it's one field after another, estate. The estate is huge. And every time that they go to a new part of the estate, a new land area, the cat has told them, tell them, the king, this belongs to the Lord Marquis of Carabas, or I'll chop you up like mincemeat. So we assume that's repeated. The master cat came at last to a stately castle, the lord of which was an ogre, the richest that had ever been. All the lands which the king had just passed by belonged to this castle. The cat, who had taken care to inform himself who this ogre was and what he could do, asked to speak with him, saying who could not pass so near his castle without having the honor of paying his respects to him. A little compliment goes a long way, doesn't it? The ogre received him as civilly as an ogre could do and invited him to sit down. I have heard, said the cat, that you're able to change yourself into any kind of creature that you have a mind to. You can, for example, transform yourself into a lion, an elephant, or the like. That is true, answered the ogre very briskly, and to convince you, I shall now become a lion. The cat was so terrified at the sight of a lion so near him that he leapt onto the roof, which caused him even more difficulty because his boots were of no use at all to him in walking on the tiles. However, the ogre resumed his natural form, and the cat came down, saying that he'd been very frightened indeed. I have further been told, said the cat, that you can also transform yourself into the smallest of animals, for example, a rat or a mouse. But I can scarcely believe that. I must admit to you that I think that would be quite impossible. Little dare here. Impossible, cried the ogre. You shall see. He immediately changed himself into a mouse and began to run about the floor. As soon as the cat saw this, he fell upon him and ate him up. There's the murder. Meanwhile, the king, who saw this fine castle of the ogres as he passed, decided to go inside. The cat, who heard the noise of his majesty's coach running over the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king, Your majesty is welcome to this castle of my lord Marquis of Carabas. He's basically telling his young master who's in the coach, coast is clear. I got it. But my lord Marquis, cried the king, and does this castle also belong to you? There can be nothing finer than this court and all the stately buildings which surround it. Let us go inside if you don't mind. The Marquis gave his hand to the princess and followed the king, who went first. They passed into a spacious hall where they found a magnificent feast which the ogre had prepared for his friends, who were coming to visit him that very day, but dared not to enter, knowing the king was there. His majesty was perfectly charmed with the good qualities of my lord Marquis of Carabas, as was his daughter, who had fallen violently in love with him. And seeing the vast estate he possessed, said to him after having drunk 5 or 6 glasses, It will be your own fault, my lord Marquis, if you do not become my son-in-law. The Marquis, making several low bows, accepted the honor which his majesty conferred upon him, and forthwith, that very same day, married the princess. The cat became a great lord, and never again ran after mice, except for entertainment. So Perrault, unlike other fairy tale storytellers, had an intended moral. There is a great advantage in receiving a large inheritance. I'm guessing if your parents inherit millions of dollars, they're going to be fine with it. He says, but diligence and ingenuity are worth more than wealth acquired from others. So basically, you get the sense that Perrault is more impressed by a self-made man. There was an earlier version of the story. I could have used that one. It can be traced back to 1634. Italian folktale storyteller Giambattista Basile retold this same story, titling it Constantino and His Cat. It's a little bit shorter. What I like about the story, though, is, in this story, the cat, who is ruthless, he gets to live in the luxury with his master. Like, he's kind of proven, and I'm thinking his master is going to let him just have whatever he wants. In the Italian version, they throw the cat out the window. Basically showing an animal and a cat are not at the same level. Okay, so I want you to scroll. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I haven't done that yet. I want you to scroll to page 5. And this is really, really important because these are the answers. Yep. I am giving you the answers. So listen carefully. I've taken the textual references out. That doesn't mean you're going to have to, that you don't have to explain something. You do. Gift giving. Convince the young man who inherited him not to eat him, but gave him a bag and a pair of boots so he could help him. The cat knew that appearance mattered, and he wanted to dress and look the part. This was to impress the king. The cat hunted a rabbit, brought it to the king, telling him it was a gift from the master of Carabas, a name he made up for his young master. Well, why would you make up a name? The name is Lord Master of Carabas. A lord is someone titled who has lands. That would have impressed the king. The next time he brought the king 2 partridges as a gift. And then which the king offered him a tip. So that's kind of really important to the story because he said, I appreciate it. Here's a tip, probably a gold coin. The gift giving game continued for 2 to 3 months. Okay. So he's kind of proven to his master, okay, I can get the job done. Then we have the planned encounter. The cat knew when the king would be taking a drive in his coach alongside the river with his daughter, the princess, and conveniently hatched a plan. The cat told his young master to follow his advice and go down by the river at a specific location and leave the rest to him. And I believe he said, and I'm going to quote him, if you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. All you must do is go and bathe in the river at the place I show you and leave the rest to me. Your fortune is made. He's already made a little bit of money, so he's probably like, all right, I'll go along with it. While his young master was bathing, the cat purposely stole his clothes, hid them under a rock, likely because they were peasant clothes. The cat cried out for help or the Marquis of Carabas would drown, and yelled this precisely when the king passed by the river. The king noticed it was the cat who represented him, who presented him with gifts, typo there, and stopped to help. While the king's men rescued the young man, the cat told the king his clothes were stolen by some rogues. The king commanded his men to fetch one of his best suits for the cat's young master and invited him into the coach with him and his daughter. Okay. And we know that the daughter falls head over heels in love with him, so we know the plan worked. So just a little background here. He was a handsome guy. So I'm sure you put anybody who's a good-looking girl or boy into really expensive clothes, they're going to look even nicer, right? And then we end with the threats. This is the only time in your outline that I want you to quote, because the quote is important because it repeated over and over and over. You, and this is wrong, you shall be chopped up like mincemeat. You shall be chopped up like mincemeat. I better get it right, right? You shall be chopped up like mincemeat. So I'm giving you the actual quote. Okay, so he passes some mowers in the field. The king's going to ask you who this field belongs to. You're going to tell him the Lord Master of Carabas. And if you don't, you should be chopped up like mincemeat. So they do when the king asks. This happens again when they pass by the reapers. You're going to tell the king when he asks, and he did, that this land, this grain, belongs to the Lord Marquis of Carabas, which they did. And then he threatened them, you shall be chopped up like mincemeat. The master cat ran further ahead to the ogre's castle. The cat, under the guise of paying the ogre his respects, like, you're so important, you're a shapeshifter, proceeded to use the ogre's talent against him. The cat complimented the ogre and convinced him to show off what shapes he could turn into. At first, the ogre turned into a lion, which took the cat off guard, frightening him. This does not stop him, the master cat, from his final cunning manipulation, where he convinced the ogre to show how small a shape he could turn into. Convinced, I kind of want to work. I'm going to change that word to dared. Don't you think you dared him? And then when you dare someone who's got an ego, they're going to do it. When the ogre turned himself into a mouse, the master cat ate him up. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I just gave you your outline. I just answered the entire thing. The answers are on page 5. So when you get to the outline, it says, do not panic when you see the 3 body paragraphs below, because I just gave you all the answers. If you're a new student, complete 1 body paragraph. 2, if I told you it was okay. If you've been in my program for over 6 months, please submit all 3. I don't want anyone this week to do the lead and the conclusion. Please read the lead and the conclusion. I'm going to read the conclusion today. Kids are really not doing well with giving enough details. Okay, so first of all, body 1, the cat started out by giving the king gifts he claimed were from his master, the Lord Marquis of Carabas. Explain, first of all, why did he ask for the gift of boots and basically a bag? Because he knew that impressions mattered, how you dressed mattered. And then he gives the king gifts. He gave the king a rabbit, 2 partridges, and then 2 to 3 months, for 2 to 3 months, more and more and more and more, and probably got little coins that he collected. But even better than that, he got the king to recognize him and really be impressed when he did finally meet, which is the next step, his master, the Lord, basically the poor peasant. Body 2, Puss in Boots planned an encounter between the king and his daughter where they would happen to come across his young master. Once the cat knew the king would recognize him, he arranged to be by the river at the exact time the king and his daughter were in the coach driving by. And he convinced his master, I will make you your fortune if you do what I say. Puss in Boots actually made it possible for the master to be given clothes of nobility. He hid his peasant clothes. If you think about it, it's genius. The king's suit is given to him, not by the king, but by the king's men, made him even more handsome. Well, yeah, if you and I got a nice Gucci suit, we'd look pretty darn good too. By the time Puss in Boots arranged for the king to meet his young master, all he had to do was finish what he started. And then finally, once his master was in the king's coach, Puss in Boots ran ahead and threatened the ogre's workers and outwitted the ogre to acquire the entire state. The cat intimidated the mowers, he terrorized the reapers, and then he finally took over the castle of the ogre. So the king and the princess were so impressed by the young master's supposed estate, they accept the young master as one of them, as upper-class mobility. So the cat proved to be a worthy ally to the young master who inherited from his father. If it were not for the plotting of the cat, his lying, cheating, threatening, and outmaneuvering, his master would be left in his same predicament, a poor peasant. By the end of the tale, the cat made the best of a horrible situation. Seeking to raise both of their stations in life, the cat schemed and conspired to elevate the young master's position in society by claiming he was the fictitious Lord Marquis of Carabas, which was a title he made up, which means the title mattered. By the end of the story, the king is hoodwinked. I love that word. It actually just means fooled, but doesn't hoodwinked sound better? Believing the deliberate deception of the cat to be truth. The young master assumed the fake title of the Lord Marquis of Carabas, won the hand in marriage to the king's daughter, and acquired the ogre's castles as his own. The cat, at the end of the story, gets to live in a life of luxury. He chases mice only for fun, for entertainment. Okay, so no, I don't want the lead in the conclusion. If you've been with me a long time, I want 3 fantastic body paragraphs. And I do expect explanations between what I gave you. I expect you to analyze what the information means, especially since I gave you the answers. All right, let's see how you do. My suggestion, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you wait a week to do your homework, which a lot of you do, is to reread the story, maybe reread the lesson, and then start your essay. Okay, this concludes lesson 3 for August 2024. Thank you for watching.